The pull of Ferrari is very difficult for any F1 driver to resist, but with such a famous name comes huge expectation, and it doesn't take much for a love affair to turn sour. This video isn't just a collection of the most controversial Ferrari departures, because even some of the most successful drivers in the team's history ended up leaving in uncomfortable circumstances, even if they ended on okay terms eventually. With a team that's been around as long as Ferrari has, there were plenty to choose from here, so let us know which ones we missed, and if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already to keep up with everything from the race. Number 10. Kimi Räikkönen, 2009. Räikkönen won on his Ferrari debut and won the World Championship at the first attempt in 2007, but just 2 years later he was paid off to make way for Fernando Alonso to arrive in 2010. Unsurprisingly, Räikkönen shrugs about the way he departed when he looks back, and he's claimed that he was ready for a break from F1 anyway, although that doesn't quite tally with his attempts to rejoin McLaren for 2010, which only fell over once reigning world champion Jenson Button suddenly became available. There were clearly no hard feelings though, as for 2014 Räikkönen returned to Ferrari for a second stint, staying for 5 years and picking up a win at Austin late in his final season. Number 9. Jean ALESI, 1995. ALESI spent 5 years at Ferrari and took his only F1 win with the team in 1995, but at the end of that year he was unimpressed to be moved aside when Michael Schumacher and Eddie Irvine were signed. ALESI's main gripe was that no one at Ferrari told him the team was signing Schumacher, which he only found out when he was tipped off by Benetton boss Flavio Briatore. When ALESI asked Ferrari, the team still wouldn't let him know what was going on. He then lashed out late in the year after disobeying team orders at the Portuguese Grand Prix, declaring to Italian TV that he was fed up and calling team boss Jean Todt the problem at Ferrari. Number 8. Niki Lauda, 1977. Lauda got away with telling Enzo Ferrari his car was rubbish the first time he drove it, but it was after his accident at the Nürburgring in 1976 that he felt something changed in the relationship with the team. Ferrari tried to delay his famous comeback at Monza later that year because it didn't want to run an extra car, but Lauda held the team to his contract. Then over the winter, Lauda was angry that Carlos Reutemann was chosen to lead the test program. Lauda eventually won a battle to be put back in charge of development, resulting in a second world title in 1977, but he took the lack of faith shown by Ferrari to heart. He signed for Brabham, but admitted in the years that followed that it was a mistake to leave Ferrari. Number 7. Michael Schumacher, 2006. Schumacher's Ferrari departure was nowhere near as explosive as some of those on this list, but given the heights he had taken the team to and the 5 world championships he won in red, his send-off could have been a bit more graceful. The first sign that Ferrari was finally planning for life after Schumacher came when it signed Kimi Räikkönen for 2007. That deal was done in 2005, giving Schumacher plenty of time to decide if he wanted to stick around beyond 2006. But the signing of Räikkönen made it clear Schumacher would no longer enjoy number 1 status if he chose to stay. Schumacher was initially intrigued by the idea of taking on Räikkönen in the same team, but he decided early in 2006 that he would retire, feeling he had nothing left to prove, and also aware of the fact his key allies Jean Todt and Ross Brawn would soon be moving on too. But Schumacher wanted to announce his decision at the end of the year so he could focus on one last title challenge. Then Luca Di Montezemolo, who chose to sign Räikkönen, declared Ferrari's 2007 lineup would be announced at the Italian Grand Prix. Schumacher won that race and was awkwardly embraced by Montezemolo in Parc Fermé. He'd not been able to leave entirely on his own terms, but the damage wasn't lasting. He stayed on as an advisor in 2007, and in 2009 tried to make a comeback to stand in for the injured Felipe Massa, which he had to abandon due to neck problems. Number 6. Nigel Mansell, 1990. Mansell had the honour of being the last driver signed by Enzo Ferrari. His first year in 1989 was filled with heroic performances in a fast but fragile car, but Mansell's love affair with Ferrari fell apart when Alain Prost joined for 1990. Mansell was convinced that Prost was working behind the scenes to gain favour with the team, and Mansell felt that his own support within Ferrari evaporated. Mansell was so fed up with the political games he felt were going on that after retiring from the British Grand Prix, he announced that not only was he leaving Ferrari at the end of the year, but he planned to retire from F1 entirely. It took Frank Williams' powers of persuasion to get him to change his mind for 1991. Number 5. René Arnoux, 1985. If this list was ranked by how mysterious the departures were, then Arnoux would be our number 1. The Frenchman split with Ferrari after the opening race of 1985, and to this day he vows never to reveal what happened. Rumours suggest Ferrari was unhappy with Arnoux' lifestyle at the time. He says he was puzzled by his struggles compared to teammate Michele Alboreto, and he went to see Enzo Ferrari because he wanted an explanation. Arnoux sat out the rest of the year and returned to start a 4-year stint with Ligier in 1986, but his F1 career never recovered after his surprise parting with Ferrari. Number 4. Fernando Alonso, 2014. By 2014, Alonso's frustration with Ferrari's inability to give him the best car on the grid was becoming too much for both sides. Luca de Montezemolo felt Alonso's behaviour was demotivating for the team, while Alonso wanted to force a move to Mercedes or Red Bull. He was contracted until 2016, and when he first asked to be granted the option to leave 2 years early, it was rejected. But then Ferrari learned of a potential break clause in Sebastian Vettel's contract with Red Bull. While it negotiated with Vettel in secret, it granted Alonso the freedom to explore other options, but then it had to wait to see if Vettel's way out of Red Bull would be triggered. By this point, the doors Alonso had knocked on were closed. Ferrari avoided recommitting to him, delaying for just long enough to secure Vettel. Alonso had no idea what was coming and suddenly found himself out of a drive, resulting in his doomed return to McLaren for 2015. Number 3. John Surtees, 1966. Surtees' departure from Ferrari was unique in that he won his final race for the team before walking away, amid political tension behind the scenes that was certainly not unique. The final straw in a relationship that was already strained by this point was a dispute over who should start the 1966 Le Mans 24 Hours, and when Surtees was told it wouldn't be him, he'd had enough. He went straight to Maranello in an attempt to thrash it out with Enzo Ferrari, but with the looming presence of Fiat in the background and senior figures in the team briefing against Surtees, Enzo felt it was too big a risk to fight to keep him. In the years that followed, both sides would admit to leaving a fair amount of success on the table by not patching things up. Number 2. Alain Prost, 1991. This story is so famous that we've done a whole video about it in the past and 2 episodes of our Bring Back V10's Classic F1 podcast. We'll do the short version here. Tensions rose between Prost and Ferrari throughout 1991 as the team realised it had not maintained its title contending form of the previous year. Prost wanted to change the culture of Ferrari, but that riled up those in charge. Despite 2 announcements earlier in the year that Prost had been signed for 1992, the tension became unbearable late in the season. Prost was furious at not being allowed to start the Spanish Grand Prix on slicks due to what he called stupid pressure, and before the final race of the year in Australia, he was fired. It's often claimed that Prost was sacked for calling his car a truck in the Japanese Grand Prix, but that was just his way of describing how the car felt after his shock absorbers failed during the race. And to prove how dysfunctional Ferrari was at that time, the men that fired Prost lost their jobs just a few weeks later. Number 1. Sebastian Vettel, 2020. Vettel's Ferrari departure wasn't the most dramatic. There was no big falling out, no mid-season walkout or sacking, but it fits the description of awkward perfectly. Ferrari announced ahead of the delayed start to the 2020 season that it had come to a mutual decision with Vettel to part ways at the end of the year. Team boss Matteo Binotto said discussions had taken place with Vettel and it became clear they didn't share the same goals. But Vettel then smashed that theory to pieces when he said there were no discussions about if they would stay together, and the first he knew of Ferrari's decision was when he received a surprise phone call from Binotto to tell him he was out of a drive for 2021. Binotto also tried to calm the situation by saying Vettel was the team's first choice until the coronavirus pandemic changed things, but Vettel was also quick to dismiss that theory. Vettel is the only example on this list of a driver who had to do a full season while knowing he was no longer wanted, and as viewers of Drive to Survive on Netflix will have seen, the relationship remained uneasy during an unsuccessful final season together. Vettel railed against orders not to make jokes about how bad Ferrari's performance was during its home race at Monza, and the following week his move to Aston Martin was announced just as Ferrari started the celebrations for its 1000th Grand Prix at Mugello. Vettel claimed he wasn't behind the timing of that news, but even so it was a fitting final act in an uncomfortable breakdown of the relationship.